and asking the Lord why you reckon that is. And he didn't say this to me. I'm just thinking this. But I think this is why it is. Because I've had to trust Him more than I ever had before. Boy, that's a sweet place to be. Dear friend, we as the church ought to do everything in our power to keep Him in the appropriate place. You see His position. He is the King. Not only do you see the position, the positional return of the Lord, but notice also the powerful return of the Lord. Having on His head a golden crown, and in His hand a sharp sickle. I think we are accustomed to seeing certain pictures of Jesus. I think most of us would say we really like that picture of Him in the garden there as He's approaching that door. And as he comes to that door and He's knocking on the door and there's no handle on the outside, you got to open it from the inside. That's one of them. I think after that we'd probably say we kind of like those pictures of Jesus when He's sitting around, those paintings. He's sitting around and He's got a bunch of kids around Him and He's holding a lamb. Boy, you look at that picture and your heart just kind of melts, and what a tender sight that is. And we see Jesus in that sight. Can I tell you, there's not a whole lot of pictures around of Jesus holding a sickle. It is an instrument of judgment. It is an instrument of warfare. And as we see Jesus, John says, yeah, He's coming down on that cloud. That's the glory of God. He's got a crown on His head. That's the authority of God. But then John says He has this. Jesus has that sickle in His hand. And that is the judgment of God. And dear friend, understand this. Make no mistake about this. When He returns, it will be a powerful return. The first time He came, He had a crown. It was a crown of thorns that they put on His head. I don't know what you do with this, but I rejoice in this. That's never going to happen again. The first time that He came, they tied Him to a post and they whipped Him. Not when He comes this next time. The first time that He came, they led Him through the streets and they spat upon Him and they mocked Him and they cursed Him. When He comes again, I want to tell you, there won't be any of that going on. That first time they nailed Him to a cross. You don't ever have to worry about that happening again. John said, when I saw Him in this manner. And He had a sickle in His hand. He saw Him as the embodiment of the power of God in that moment. And make no mistake about this, dear friend, when the Lord comes and He establishes His kingdom upon this earth, it will be one of power. There is the powerful return of the Lord. I can't help but wonder about that moment. What the reaction of folks are going to be. Now, we're going to see that it's not what we all think it's going to be. Can I tell you, there's going to be plenty that are going to reject that. There are going to be plenty that are going to stand against that. Now, I want you to think about this. In chapter 13, we saw the Antichrist and the false prophet arise. They rise out of the sea and out of the earth. They come up out of all the midst of all that. And now the whole world at that time is saying, this is our king. We want the Antichrist. He is the one. Look, he has come up out of the sea. Jesus is returning in the clouds. He is returning just exactly the way that He left. And He is returning just exactly the way that He said that He would. I want to tell you, anybody with any common sense ought to be able to say this. That's the one you ought to be following. That's the one that you ought to be serving. But you understand, as we go on, we're going to see there's plenty in this world at that moment that will say, we're just going to stay with the Antichrist. I have often wondered why you can't get some people to accept the gospel. Now, folks, there have been people through the years that I've tried and tried, I've pleaded with, I've prayed over them, I've thought about everything coming and going, what I could say, what I could do, how do you get them to see the truth, and yet they seem like they just never been able to come to the truth. I want to tell you something. If Jesus returning on the cloud from glory, Him coming Himself, and there are going to be folks that won't turn to Him in that moment, we ought not to be too surprised when we proclaim the gospel and they reject it. Well, you see His return. He is coming. Church, we got to be ready for the fact that He's going to call us out of here. One of these days, the church is going to be raptured, and I'm excited about that. But there is a day coming that the Lord Himself will return to this world and establish His kingdom. And I want you to know something. I'm also excited about that. Can't you wait to see what the Lord does with Jerusalem? Can't you wait to see, dear friend, what happens when the Lord establishes His kingdom there and His throne in Jerusalem? What a time that's going to be. Well, that is what we are seeing here in verse number 14. All right, let's stand together.